Nobody warned these fans about what was actually waiting for them in America. They packed their bags, expecting chaos, expensive tickets, unfriendly crowds, a country the news told them to fear. They landed expecting the worst version of the United States. What they found instead broke the internet in a way no goal, no red card, no controversy ever could. Because somewhere between a gas station in rural Texas and a stranger's boat in Miami, thousands of World Cup fans discovered something the headlines never mention. And once you see what actually happened to them, you will never look at the real America the same way again. For months before a single ball was kicked, the story being told about the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the United States was not a happy one. International reporters focused on ticket prices spiraling out of control, with some seats for the final at MetLife Stadium reportedly listed at $11,000. Players themselves were pushing back publicly, calling the pricing indefensible, while FIFA officials defended it as simple market logic. Fans were told to expect empty seats, logistical nightmares, and a tournament shaped more by money than by joy. Add to that a wave of visa controversies, with reports that supporters from countries like Ivory Coast and Senegal were denied entry altogether, and the entire narrative around America's World Cup felt like it was writing itself before the opening whistle even blew. But here is where it gets interesting. Somewhere between the outrage headlines and the ticket price scandals, something else was quietly happening on the ground. It didn't start with a press release. It didn't start with FIFA. It started with ordinary people filming ordinary moments on their phones, uploading them without expecting anything, and watching those clips explode into millions of views almost overnight. This wasn't planned. Nobody scripted it. And that is exactly why it hit so hard. Think about what that actually means. In an era where every major event is manufactured, marketed, and prepackaged for maximum engagement, the most viral storyline of the entire 2026 World Cup turned out to be something FIFA never advertised at all. The unscripted, unfiltered reaction of foreign fans encountering everyday American life for the very first time. It began small. A tourist filming himself trying ranch dressing for the first time, someone documenting the sheer size of an American supermarket aisle, a traveler stunned that gas stations in the South operate like small cities, complete with fresh food, seating areas, and enough merchandise to fill a department store. These were not political statements. They were not think pieces. They were just raw human reactions to a country that, according to the fans experiencing it, looked nothing like what they had been told to expect. And then it escalated. What started as amusement over portion sizes and self-serve ice dispensers turned into something far more emotional. Fans stopped talking about food. They started talking about people. Read that again. The biggest story of the World Cup in America was not the football. It was the people. Take the case of Australian creator Dan McNamara. He posted a video that would go on to rack up millions of views, filmed from a boat in Miami. In the clip, McNamara explains that an American he had never met before, someone he had simply crossed paths with days earlier, invited him out for a private day on the water. No agenda. No cameras from a production company. Just a stranger offering hospitality to a visitor thousands of miles from home. McNamara, still visibly processing what was happening, told his followers he had heard about American hospitality his whole life, but never expected to experience it exactly like this. But here's where it gets worse for the narrative everyone expected walking into this tournament, because McNamara's story was not an isolated incident. It was a pattern. And once you start looking at the pattern, you realize the entire international perception of the United States was quietly being rewritten in real time, one small act of kindness at a time. In Boston, an entire wave of Scottish supporters descended on the city ahead of matches, and something unusual happened. Locals began jokingly renaming the city New Scotland. War. Fans in kilts filled the streets in numbers so large that residents said you could not walk a single block without encountering bagpipes, chanting, or a stranger in tartan asking for directions. The president of the Boston Chamber of Commerce went on record saying the visiting supporters had become unofficial ambassadors for the city, documenting everything from historic landmarks to local bars for audiences back home who had never considered visiting America at all. This is not chaos. This is strategy, except nobody designed it. It happened organically, city by city, without a marketing department behind it. In Kansas, locals did something that quietly became one of the most talked about gestures of the entire tournament. Ahead of a match involving Algeria, residents carved the Algerian flag directly into a grass field, a quiet, physical welcome for a group of traveling fans who likely never expected such a personal gesture in a country thousands of miles from their own. It wasn't broadcast on television. It wasn't part of any official FIFA program. It was just neighbors deciding that visitors deserved to feel seen. Meanwhile, further south, restaurant owners were reportedly driving international fans to matches after they couldn't find rideshare drivers. A local deli owner gave British tourists a free lunch, telling them it was simply because they had traveled so far to be there. Firefighters in Alabama opened their doors to foreign visitors, giving impromptu tours of their station and handing out department merchandise as souvenirs. None of these people were paid. None of them were told to do this. They just did it. Now think about what that means for the story being told about America before this tournament even began. The narrative was ticket prices, visa denials, political tension, and empty stadium seats. The reality, according to thousands of fans posting from the ground, was strangers giving up their time, their money, and their homes to make visitors feel welcome. And this is where everything changes, because the viral moments stopped being about novelty and started becoming about something much bigger. An emotional experience fans were struggling to put into words. One recurring theme kept surfacing across thousands of posts. Fans began describing their time in America using a single word. Healing, not exciting, not fun, healing. In a year defined globally by division, economic anxiety, and political noise, visitors from countries that rarely interact directly with ordinary Americans were suddenly documenting a level of warmth that felt, to them, almost disorienting. One creator posted what he called a heartfelt message to the American people, saying he never wanted them to forget what this summer felt like. In the comments beneath his video, thousands of strangers from different countries wrote the same sentiment in different words, that somehow, in the middle of a soccer tournament, people had found a way to cut through the noise and remember something simple about human connection that the news cycle had buried. But according to informed observers watching this unfold, what's happening goes deeper than a few feel-good clips. Dr. Rachel Fu, who chairs the Department of Tourism, Hospitality, and Event Management at the University of Florida, explained that what tourists remember is rarely the landmark, it's the person. The Uber driver who recommended a barbecue joint nobody else knew about, the volunteer who helped a lost traveler find a train platform, the stranger who simply said, "Welcome." According to Fu, this is exactly why these World Cup videos are spreading faster and further than any official tourism campaign ever could, because word of mouth, especially emotional word of mouth, builds trust in ways paid advertising never manages to. What most people are not seeing is the sheer scale behind this cultural shift. Oxford Economics projected that roughly 24 million international visitors would travel to the United States specifically for this World Cup. And the organization predicted the tournament would spark a powerful rebound in international travel demand, filling hotels and proving the broader economic reach of a global mega event. That is not a small number. That is over 1 million individual human beings, each one arriving with preconceived notions about America, and each one leaving as a walking, talking, filming testimony about what they actually experienced. Now here's where the story takes an unexpected turn, because not every viral moment out of this tournament has been warm and uncomplicated. The same weeks that produced boat trips in Miami and bagpipes in Boston also produced tension in New York City, where supporters of Argentina and Algeria clashed violently in Times Square ahead of their opening match, with videos showing groups exchanging punches before police intervened. One person was taken into custody. It was one of the first major examples of fan violence at this tournament, a stark reminder that hosting the world does not automatically mean the world arrives in perfect harmony. And this is where the real story of America's World Cup becomes far more complicated than a highlight reel of kindness. Because at the exact same time, strangers were inviting fans onto boats and carving flags into grass fields, other supporters were being denied entry to the country altogether. Representatives for fan groups from Ivory Coast and Senegal publicly stated that visa applications for their supporters had been denied, with officials reportedly indicating certain nationalities were simply not wanted on American soil during the tournament. Whole travel plans were canceled. Entire fan bases were left watching from home, unable to witness a tournament being hosted in part in their name. Think about what it means to hold both of these realities at once. On one side, viral footage of Alabama firefighters giving free tours to strangers. On the other, entire national fan communities blocked at the border before they ever got the chance to experience that same hospitality. This is not a simple story. This is not a clean narrative of a country redeeming itself in the eyes of the world. It is messier than that, and according to the fans actually living through it, that messiness is precisely what makes the story feel real instead of manufactured. The real story is that America, as experienced through this tournament, is not one country. It is dozens of countries stacked on top of each other, depending entirely on which zip code, which stranger, which encounter a visitor happens to have. A fan road tripping through small-town Texas is having a fundamentally different America than a fan stuck at a border checkpoint being told their visa was rejected. Both experiences are equally true. Both are happening during the exact same weeks, under the exact same tournament, under the exact same flag. This is where the story escalates again, because the contradictions did not stop there. Even inside the stadiums, the tension between spectacle and substance kept surfacing. FIFA president Gianni Infantino defended the $11,000 final tickets by insisting the organization simply had to apply market rates, a comment that drew immediate backlash from fans and players alike. American midfielder Timothy Weah publicly said the pricing was too expensive, while his own manager dismissed the criticism, creating friction even within teams representing the host nation. Several matches saw noticeably empty sections, despite reportedly selling out, with FIFA later explaining that ticketed fans were simply standing in concourses instead of their seats, an explanation that satisfied almost nobody watching at home. But here's where it gets worse for anyone hoping this tournament would be a simple, uncomplicated celebration. Political symbolism kept bleeding into the football itself. During Iran's match against New Zealand in Los Angeles, one Iranian player performed a gesture simulating the firing of a gun after scoring, a moment immediately interpreted online as a political statement given the ongoing tension between Iran and the United States. A teammate made a separate gesture he later admitted carried political meaning, though he declined to explain what exactly it meant. In a tournament already saturated with symbolism, every gesture, every flag, every celebration was instantly read as commentary on something far bigger than the scoreline. And this is where everything changes again, because despite all of this friction, despite the visa denials, the violence in Times Square, the political gestures, and the ticket price scandals, the dominant story that kept breaking through, the one clip after clip that kept going viral above everything else, remained the hospitality, not the controversy, not the politics, the kindness. According to social media analysts tracking the tournament's online footprint, the volume of videos depicting positive American encounters vastly outpaced coverage of the controversies, at least in terms of raw engagement and shares. Millions of people who had never planned a trip to the United States were suddenly watching Norwegian fans pack into a Boston nightclub to watch a match, or Japanese supporters in elaborate face paint trying Texas barbecue for the first time, or Brazilian fans walking across the Brooklyn Bridge draped in flags, laughing with strangers who stopped just to take photos with them. Think about what that means for how a country's global reputation actually gets built. Not through embassies, not through official campaigns, through a firefighter in Alabama handing over a t-shirt, through a deli owner refusing payment, through a family in Kansas kneeling in a field with garden tools, quietly carving a flag that does not belong to their own country into the grass, simply because they wanted a group of strangers to feel welcome. But according to informed observers, there's a deeper layer to why these clips are resonating so intensely right now. The world in 2026 has spent years consuming a non-stop stream of division, economic anxiety, and geopolitical tension. Wars, tariffs, immigration battles, and political polarization dominate global headlines every single day. Against that backdrop, a video of a German superfan road-tripping through small towns, linking up with a country singer he had never met, and documenting genuine, unscripted joy hits differently than it would have a decade ago. It doesn't feel like content anymore. It feels like relief. And here is the twist almost nobody predicted. That same German superfan, known online simply as Freddy, became such a phenomenon that when his own national team was eliminated from the tournament, he chose not to go home. He extended his stay in the United States through the rest of the World Cup, effectively becoming more invested in America's version of the tournament than in his own country's remaining chances. Critics later dug up old posts where Freddy had once criticized the United States, using it to accuse him of performing enthusiasm for clout. But defenders pushed back just as hard, arguing that changing your mind after actually experiencing something firsthand is not hypocrisy, it's growth. And either way, the debate itself only added more fuel to a story that had already taken on a life far beyond football. Now think about the bigger picture forming underneath all of this. A tournament that began under a cloud of ticket price outrage and visa controversy is ending, week by week, as one of the most talked about displays of grassroots hospitality in modern sports history. Tourism researchers are already calling this a case study in how word-of-mouth storytelling can reshape a country's global image faster and more convincingly than any paid campaign ever could. Word for word, clip for clip, ordinary Americans, all but who had no idea they were representing their country on a global stage, ended up becoming its most persuasive ambassadors. But before this story wraps into something too neat, too clean, too much like a fairy tale, it's worth remembering what was happening at the exact same time to the fans who never got the chance to experience any of it. Every viral clip of kindness in Texas exists alongside a canceled trip from Ivory Coast. Every heartwarming moment in Boston exists alongside a family in Senegal that watched the opening match from home because their visa was denied. The America being celebrated online is real, but it was never universally accessible, and that contradiction is not a footnote. It is central to understanding what actually happened this summer. So where does that leave the story now, with the tournament moving toward its final stages and millions of fans beginning to fly home, carrying two completely different versions of America in their memory depending on which side of the border they were allowed to stand on? Will the viral hospitality outlast the headlines that created it, reshaping how the rest of the world sees the United States for years to come? Or will it fade the same way tournament goodwill always fades, replaced within months by the next news cycle, the next controversy, the next reminder of everything that divided people in the first place? Will the countries that were turned away ever get their own version of this story, or will their absence simply become the part of the 2026 World Cup that nobody wants to talk about once the trophy is lifted? And when historians look back on this tournament years from now, will they remember the empty stadium seats and the $11,000 tickets? Or will they remember a stranger on a boat in Miami, a flag carved into Kansas grass, and a country that, for one summer, looked a little different than the version the world had been shown for years? Nobody knows yet. And maybe that uncertainty is the most honest ending this story could have.